reducing the chance of nuclear war. The glue that held this theory of mutual nuclear suicide together was the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile (ABM) Treaty, where the Soviet Union and the United States agreed to limitations on the deployment of anti-missile defenses. An effective ABM capability gave a nation the theoretical ability to win a nuclear war by launching a debilitating first strike, and then destroying in flight any missiles that survived. Limiting ABM defenses curtailed an arms race by reducing the impetus to develop new weapons capable of breaching an opponent's defenses. The ABM Treaty provided a foundation of strategic stability, built on the precepts of mutually assured destruction, that enabled both the United States and the Soviet Union to enter into meaningful arms reduction agreements, including the groundbreaking Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty of 1987, and the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty of 1991. Ironically, it was President Reagan's insistence in 1986 on continuing the research on the Star Wars anti-missile system, that precluded the possibility of eliminating nuclear weapons altogether. This trend toward nuclear disarmament continued in the decade following the collapse of the Soviet Union, with President Bill Clinton signing a new START II treaty with Russian President Boris Yeltsin in 1993. START II eliminated the deployment of multiple warheads on ICBMs, further stabilizing the strategic balance between the two nations. The START II treaty never entered into force. In 2002, George W. Bush's administration withdrew from the ABM treaty, citing the need to develop defenses against missile launches from so-called rogue states, like Iraq, Iran, and North Korea. In doing so, Bush unhinged the foundation upon which U.S. Russian strategic arms control was built. A new arms reduction treaty, signed in 2003, stripped away on-site, inspection-based verification, and did nothing to limit the deployment of ICBMs armed with multiple warheads. While the New START treaty, signed by the Obama administration in 2010, brought back limited on-site inspections, there was no prohibition against ICBMs with multiple warheads. Moreover, the Obama administration continued to develop and deploy anti-missile defenses, both in the United States and in Europe, resurrecting in Russia Cold War-era concerns that the Americans would leverage this new ABM capability to subject Russia to nuclear blackmail, threatening a nuclear strike for which Russia would have no response. The RS-28 missile system, inclusive of Object 4202, can trace its origin to American deployment of ABMs. These concerns were on display on December 22, 2016, when President Putin delivered a speech that made the recent Russian developments public. We need to strengthen the military potential of Russia's strategic nuclear forces, Putin said, especially with missile complexes that can reliably penetrate any existing and prospective missile defense systems. This speech would have more than likely been buried by the American media save for one person, President-elect Donald Trump, who on the same day as Putin's speech tweeted a reply: "The United States must greatly strengthen and expand its nuclear capability until such time as the world comes to its senses regarding nukes." The president-in-waiting then doubled down on this line of thinking, telling the hosts of MSNBC's Morning Joe program the following morning, "Let it be an arms race. We will outmatch them at every pass and outlast them all." The Russian response was surprisingly muted. Russia, Putin said the following day, was not seeking a new arms race, but only to improve its capabilities in the face of American deployments of anti-missile defenses. Russia was now strong enough to repulse any aggressor, Putin said. As for Donald Trump, there is nothing new about it. During his election campaign he said the U.S. needs to bolster its nuclear capabilities and its armed forces in general, the Russian president noted. During the campaign, candidate Trump had been infamously unfamiliar with the basics of American nuclear strategy. At a primary debate, after the moderator underscored the age of America's nuclear arsenal, the B-52s, a nuclear-capable bomber, are older than I am. The missiles are old. The submarines are aging out. Trump was asked, "What's your priority among our nuclear triad?" The best the future president could come up with was, I think, for me, nuclear is just the power. The devastation is very important to me. There is no doubt that Trump received a more detailed briefing on America's nuclear capability upon being elected. The aging American nuclear arsenal, he would have learned, is a critical national security issue. A new stealth bomber is in development, as is a new class of ballistic missile submarines. And the Obama administration had initiated a process for producing and deploying a new ground-launched ICBM that would cost the American public $1 trillion over the course of the next decade. This perceived weakness, combined with Putin's public pronouncement of Russian strength, apparently was enough to set the president-elect off on his tweeting and morning talk show rant. A few days shy of his inauguration, Trump seemed to have a change of heart. In a wide-ranging interview with British journalists, Trump noted that, "They have sanctions on Russia, let's see if we can make some good deals with Russia." What deal was Trump suggesting? For one thing, I think nuclear weapons should be way down and reduced very substantially, that's part of it. But Russia's hurting very badly right now because of sanctions, but I think something can happen that a lot of people are going to benefit. The Times of London speculated that the first foreign policy trip President Trump would embark on would be a nuclear disarmament summit with President Putin. A Trump spokesperson rejected this as false news. While Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a January 28 phone call with President Trump, was warm to the idea of nuclear disarmament talks with the Trump administration, the Russians overall were dismissive of a deal that traded disarmament for the lifting of sanctions. An offer to engage in nuclear arms control talks, Russia's foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov noted, would be furthered by first reviewing the issue of U.S. sanctions against Russia. But there could not be any direct linkage between the two. The Russian foreign minister also noted that the agenda for any such negotiations should include hypersonic weapons, U.S. missile defenses, space weapons and nuclear testing, in short, a broad range of interconnected issues that the new Trump administration appears ill-equipped to handle at this juncture. Rex Tillerson, the new Secretary of State, has been silent on Russian nuclear disarmament. And James Mattis, the new Secretary of Defense and the one Trump cabinet official who has opined publicly about disarmament issues, appears supportive of fielding a new land-based ICBM, thereby closing the door on the possibility of trading those weapons in exchange for similarly deep cuts by Russia. In his testimony before the Senate Armed Services Committee, Mattis noted that these missiles would be a cost-imposing strategy on an adversary, noting that any enemy that wants to take us on is going to have to commit 2, 3, 4 weapons to make sure they take each one out.